The truth right there.
That's good stuff. Be honest. How many of you have lived that car ride right there? Okay. That's the reason my wife and I drive separate cars to church every single Sunday. It's not because I have to be here early. Hey, parenting is hard, and that's one of the things that we're going to be acknowledging as we talk today. Hey, if you're visiting with us, I want to introduce myself. My name is Adam, and I'm the discipleship pastor, and I'm joined by Kevin. He is our small groups pastor, and we're excited that we get to unpack week 3 of a sermon series called Next, a battle fought by all. The motivation behind this series is really simple. We believe that the world has a strategy to pull our children away from the things that God has in store for them. And so what we're doing is we're drawing a line in the sand. We're deciding that we are going to engage in the battle. We are enlisting ourselves as a church, as a community of believers into this battle so that we can fight for the next generation. Last week, Reggie Joyner spoke, and he did such a great job. How many of y'all enjoyed what Reggie had to say? Anybody?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
How many of you would want to follow him up here on stage? Anybody? Yeah, neither did we. That's why there's 2 of us, because we're thinking that maybe if Kevin brings his best and maybe if I bring my best, maybe it'll like halfway get to what Reggie Joyner brought last week. But hey, we're going to start off this way. Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your family and okay. Tell us what the hardest part of parenting is for you. Not the spiritual stuff. We'll get into that in a minute, but the stuff that every parent would struggle with.
All right. I don't know about you guys, but after a long day of work, man, who just loves to come home and just like be bombarded with children? Any of you guys love that? Some of y'all are like, I live for that, right? Some of you. I struggle with that, if I'm being very honest. Right now, one of the hardest things for me, my girls right now, I have 2 of them, 5 and 7 years old, and one of the very first things that happens when I get into the house, like they're like, I don't know how the best way to describe it. It's like ticks, right? Like it just like sucked onto me and won't leave me alone. Like there's no space for my kids and me. I think about that sometimes. I have 2 girls. I grew up in an all-boy house, and in growing up in an all-boy house, there are some things that I never experienced. We didn't cry a lot in my house, right? I brought home my girls, and from the very day I brought home the first girl, I do not believe we have had a day without tears shed in my house. I've learned that there's a new personality trait that usually kicks in every 6 months that I wasn't prepared for. And to be honest, man, when I think about this, one of the hardest things for me is learning to be patient and loving and still guide my children. I don't know how many of you can really identify with this, but sometimes like knowing that I'm doing the right thing in correcting my children is going to cause an argument, a fit, a breakdown. That is so hard for me sometimes when I'm completely exhausted, but still standing firm and giving that boundary is so hard for me. I would say that's probably the biggest thing that we've probably focused on the last couple months.
Yeah, that fits. Well, listen, for me, I don't want to trivialize your pain, but something happened when we went from 2 kids to 3 kids. Oh. I don't know if y'all have been through that or not. I remember week 1, we thought this is easy. We took him to the store, and we're like, hey, this is easy. This one doesn't even move. Eventually, he started to move. And now we can't keep all 3 of them safe, so we have to prioritize every time we leave the house which ones we're going to keep alive that particular day. But I do have 3 kids. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and I've got a 3-year-old son. And for me, the hardest part of parenting by far is being the judge of every single malfeasance that happens within our household. Oh. You know what I'm talking about? I don't care whose toy that is. I don't care who got to pick the movie or the restaurant that we ate at last time, and I certainly don't care who the air your sister is breathing belongs to. You know? I mean, I can try 1, 2, 3, 100 cases a day, and I'm fine. But by the time we hit case number 14,342, I'm tired, and I'm ready to put the gavel through somebody's iPad. You know, like that's how I feel each and every day. Listen, the truth is there's a ton of difficult seasons, a ton of difficult aspects of parenting, and it's different at every stage of life. I know some of you are probably in that phase where it's diapers, you know, or it's sleep deprivation. Some of you, it's driving lessons, and it's rebelliousness, or any number of other things. But there's one responsibility that we share at every single stage of our child's development, and that's the responsibility as parents to raise children who love Jesus Christ. And that's not always an easy thing to do. Kevin, what's the hardest part for you about raising children who love Jesus?
Oh, nothing. They're perfect.
Good.
No,
I figured that was going to be your
listen,
answer. Yeah.
I did youth ministry for 15 years before this. You would think that 15 years of youth ministry would have prepared me to be the most excellent dad on the planet. It has not, right? Like when I go back and I think about this, Reggie Joyner was talking about this last week. Parents used to come to me, like I was a college kid, and parents would be like, what do you think I should do about this? And y'all, I gave so much advice back then that I wish I could go back and be like, you're a goofball. Like, stop asking that kid questions, right? Like, I really sit back and I think about this. The truth is, it's hard. Like, I feel like it's really easy to do this for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I can put on for anybody, right? Like, I'm not trying to do that, but the truth is, like, I can look good for anybody for a couple hours. But the truth is, when I get home and it's me and my family, to continue to still look, be like, act like Jesus is so hard sometimes. Right? I think about the fruits of the Spirit. When you ask that question, here's what I think about. I want to constantly show the fruits of the Spirit, to show love, to show joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness. But in the middle of that, I think the hardest thing is, how do I do that in the middle of a tantrum? How do I do that and still balance, hey, be dad, still be this voice that they can hear, and then still also be this ear for them that you can just listen to? You know, I think that's probably one of the hardest things for me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's the same thing for me. My kids see me when I'm not at my best. They see me when I'm angry. They see me when I'm frustrated. They see me when I'm tired. Listen, I had a migraine headache yesterday. I was not nearly as patient or polite as I probably should have been to my children, and they see me through all of that. You know, the truth is, I can fake things and give off the illusion that I have it all together in certain environments. But when it comes to my kids, there's no way to fake it. They see me when I'm absolutely falling apart. And imperfection to them, they view that as hypocrisy in me. And that complicates everything because they do see me in those difficult moments. So parenting is hard. And listen, the responsibility that we have for our kids' spiritual development is something that we're all wrestling with if we have kids at home, if we're trying to lead them in a way that helps them love Jesus. And so what I want us to do is I want to give you some strategy, if you are a parent, that's going to alleviate the pressure and make this a little bit easier. Here's our sermon in a sentence today. In order to fight for the next generation, we must widen the circle of influence. We must widen the circle of influence. And listen, this is where everybody comes into the equation. Middle school students, high school students, college students, adults that may not have kids living at home. This is where everybody comes into the equation because we're going to have to work together to widen the circle of influence so that we can raise children together as a community of believers. The responsibility is ultimately on the parents, but listen, the people that we enlist and the relationships that we encourage will expand our influence, and it will maximize our results. So this is a theme that we find all throughout the Bible. Where's a place that you find this theme in Scripture?
We sat down, we probably started doing this stuff 2 months ago, right? And so
I started last night.
Yeah. You're a pro. I don't even know what to say to that. Listen, we started this process, and I kept thinking, hey, where can I look for guidance to see where the Lord used people to really show this? And so I started reading in my quiet times. I was going through Chronicles. Who goes through Chronicles? I don't know, but I was going through Chronicles, right? As I was going through Chronicles, if you know about that, what it does, it looks at the story of kings. And I really enjoyed looking at the story of kings in this because I kept thinking to myself, listen, to lead an entire country, a nation, you would probably have to have some type of some type of backing or influence. And so I came across this in 1 Chronicles 26, 3-5. If y'all read it with me, that would be great. It says this: Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, And he reigned in Jerusalem for 52 years. One of the things that you constantly see in those that followed the Lord and did right in the eyes of the Lord, they were really usually like blessed with a decent reign on leading the nation. It says his mother's name was Jechaliah. She was from Jerusalem. That's going to be important later. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And listen to this, just as his father Amaziah had done. He sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of God. And goes on and finishes this way. It says, as long as he sought the Lord, God gave him success. The kings in the Old Testament were usually known for two things. Did they do right in the eyes of the Lord, or did they do evil? And I thought that was so powerful. As you like continue to go back and go through Chronicles, I can't tell you how many kings that were bad kings usually had bad sons. And I'm saying that to say this. I wonder how much pouring into was happening in there. And so I go back and I look at this. Here's some things, 4 things that we can learn from Uzziah. The things I looked at is this. His dad did right in God's eyes. We kind of talked about that. The second thing is this. He made the scripture made sure to note that where his mom was from, which was from Jerusalem. If you know about this, sometimes people would marry outside of Jerusalem, and they would always have to deal with this same thing of worshiping false idols. And they would usually be brought down because that's what they had married into. So I think it's important, man. Like his dad married into somebody that believed the same things that he believed. It's vital, by the way, for marriage. Keep going in some of this. Third thing is he had Zechariah. He was a prophet that poured into him and instructed him to listen, to fear the Lord. How many of us, like the truth is, like when you think about loving the Lord, it's so important to love the Lord, but it's also so important to have this healthy fear of the Lord. You ever have a parent like that really did it right? Some of you guys, I know there's a lot of us that come from different backgrounds, and maybe when I talk about fearing your parent, that comes off a little bit different. But if you had a really good parent, that idea of this healthy fear, this thing that says, "Ooh, I don't need to do that because this is going to be something that they'll get on to me about." And you know what that looks like. And then finally, for this last part, the fourth thing is this. And students, I thought about this. In doing youth ministry for so long, I can't help but think about this. As long as he followed God's ways, God granted him success. And y'all got this little start right here. It's such a blessing, man. I wish I could go back and take some things back. What a phenomenal start, man. Remember to hang on to that. Parents, you as well. How about you, man? What brings that about? What scripture do you think about?
Well, I think it's all throughout the Bible, but really the part that stands out to me most is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And it's in this passage that Moses is speaking to the people. And this is what he says. Hear, O Israel. We're coming back to that phrase in just a second because that's important. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Listen, side note, we use Orange curriculum that Reggie Joyner leads, like we talked about last week. But for our young people, student ministry and below, all the way down to babies, we have this thing called the Parent Q app that allows you to do exactly what he talked about. It gives you resources to ask your kids or to ask your grandkids. I love hearing grandparents that are asking their children about the lesson they had Sunday, and their kids always think, how do you know what we talked about? Because I'm a grandparent, and I'm everywhere, and I know exactly what's going on. But they give you some practical ways to do that. But here's why that passage is important to me. You see, we assume when we read this, because there's so much conversation about family and children, that what Moses is doing is he's instructing parents to take on this responsibility. And on some level, that's certainly true. But go back to that first verse, and in verse 4, it says, Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel. You see, what Moses did is he didn't call the parents together for a parenting seminar. He called the community together, and he said, let's talk about what really matters. And when he brought people together, listen, the culture that the Israelites had, it was a large community of people that took the responsibility on themselves of acting like a community, living like a community, and parenting children together. See, in the crowd that Moses assembled, there was aunts and there was uncles and there was grandparents and there was older brothers and sisters, and there was just this wider group of adults, and together they were going to support the parents and they were going to help out as they parented and raised the next generation. You see, it's encouraging to me to understand that from the very beginning, God designed us to raise children within the context of community. It takes some of the pressure off of me feeling like, you know what, I don't have to get it all right. You know, I don't have to be everything for my kids. I just need to facilitate some of that so that they can get exactly what they need from the community of believers. You know, King Uzziah, he talked about, he practiced this, and Moses preached this, and it's something that I think we've got to get real serious about within this body of believers. So let's get practical. As a parent, how do you act strategically about this? Like, how do you intentionally make sure that you're widening the circle for your kids?
Well, I really believe this. If you're married in here and you're raising kids, I want us to all understand. Listen, man, when there's this mindset, you guys remember when you got married, one of the very first things that your pastor should have said at some point is that it's time to kind of leave the nest, like leave and cleave, and you're going to become one, right? Y'all remember this? Here's one of the things I know. In beginning to widen the circle, I've got to solidify what's happening at the house. Right? So me and Georgette, I need to make sure that me and Georgette are on the same page. And some of the things that we do to start out with that, we try and meet twice a month. This kind of sounds silly, and it sounds like a business transaction. It's not, right? But this meeting that happens twice a month, we go over our finances. We make sure that we look at that. If there's a rub that's happening within the marriage, we'll address it before if we need to. But sometimes, like, this is a time where maybe like the kids are going out, they're doing something else, or maybe they're at school or whatever, and we sit down and we begin to kind of talk about, hey, this happened, and I don't know if you meant it this way, but it's kind of causing a little bit of issues. I go back, and you may sit back and you may wonder how this works. Listen, if a parent or if kids see a strong relationship at the house, look, man, how strong is that for, one, their future marriage, but also, look, if your bride, if Jesus is supposed to kind of be the groom, then we're showing and revealing our kids what the relationship with Jesus looks like by loving our spouse.
It made me very uncomfortable, but
so sorry.
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus for it.
Oh, bless it, man. All right, so we go back and we look at some of these things, and we really go back and we think about this. We even talk about if kids are acting up, we talk about how we should discipline or give boundaries. We even go and we think about like friendships. If there's a certain friend or group of friends that we haven't hung out with in a while, this is a time to do calendar work. I know we're kind of giving you some really simple tips here, but that's really what we're asking for is simply that. And then I go back and I think about that. We also try to surround them with grandparents. We try and surround them by the church, obviously. We have phenomenal children's ministers and directors. We have a great youth director here as well. I want nothing more than for my kids to come in and be loved by them and to have another voice of influence. And in every single, I think you said this earlier, in every single place, maybe you didn't say this, in every single place, if it's Kidsville or some other place or in the youth, they're surrounded by a small group leader. I want that for my kids. Absolutely want that. This reminds me of simply this, that I'm not in this fight by myself. Me and Georgette, we're not fighting this fight by ourselves. What about you, man? What kind of comes to mind here?
Yeah, well, I wish I could just trust that my kids were always going to talk to me. You know, like they're always going to tell me everything that's going on, but that's just not the case. There comes a point where they need somebody who's not their parent to love on them and to invest in them, to pour on them. And I believe that the church is the best environment that you can create those kinds of relationships. Hands down. There's nowhere else that you can drop your kids off and say, pour into them. Like, invest in them. That's why you're here. Do something with them that helps them have strong, healthy relationships and helps them to love Jesus. And that's really what it's all about. And through this church, it's not just the small groups that all of our kids get to be a part of and things like that. It's the relationships that expand outside of the classroom environment that really makes a difference and allows us to widen the circle of influence in their lives. You know, when I think about this, I think about my 9-year-old. My 9-year-old has a teacher at school, and her teacher goes to church here, and she's actually served alongside her teacher, painting benches and things like that to get the school ready for people to show up. And that does my heart so much good to know that my daughter every single day has somebody from the church that's loving on her in a way that I can't. You know, I know that while she's teaching math, she's also modeling the love of Christ, and that's huge for me. My 6-year-old, she got a letter a few weeks ago from one of the worship leaders in Main Street, and the worship leader just said, "Hey, I enjoyed watching you worship today. It was really powerful to see how much you got into it." And man, my daughter's face lit up because she thought, you know what, somebody notices me. Somebody values me. Somebody sees me. Somebody who doesn't have to because they're not my parent and they know me by name. And that's huge. That's part of the community of believers that's coming alongside her. And then my 3-year-old had a birthday a little while ago. I don't know how long ago it was. It's hard to think about dates when you're on stage in front of this many people. But about a month ago, you won't know the difference. He had a birthday party, and when he had his birthday party, all he wanted to do was invite his small group leader from the church. And not only did she come, but she loved on him in a really special way, as if, you know what, that was her own kid. And that's huge that we have that body of believers surrounding our children. You know, my wife and I are grateful that we don't have to do it alone. We've got other adults, other people that we can lean on and know that they're investing in our kid as well. Listen, this is why I tell parents, you have got to plan your schedule around Sunday mornings. Plan your life around Sunday mornings. What's the statistic, I think, is that people attend church like a time and a half every month. Is that right? Something like that.
We see y'all leaving right now.
Yeah, people
right?
walking out now to go to the bathroom. But really, you have got to prioritize Sunday morning experiences if you have children, or Wednesday night if they're students, because as you work around that, you're putting them in environments where this kind of stuff is going to happen naturally. Listen, I love the lake. I really do enjoy the lake. The lake is a great recreational place, but it's no substitute for the people that are going to love on your kids and that are going to be in their life for the long haul. And so that's something that we want to promote. Listen, our church provides a great opportunity for you to be strategic about this, but you can also be strategic in other environments as well. My kids have friends whose house we encourage them to go spend the night at, not just so we can get away from them and have our 2 times a month together, but to talk about finances and stuff, but it's also because
oh man,
I know it's also because welcome to adult church, middle and high school students. But it's also because we know that their parents who are not part of this church are part of another church that we love, and we know that they love Jesus. And because they love Jesus, they're pouring into our kids. We know that there's teachers that love on them. There's other people, there's friends that show up in their lives, and we nurture those relationships. Listen, their coaches are a huge influence in their life. I didn't just sell my kidney for the sake of gymnastics, okay? That was part of it, but I also did it because over here where my daughter goes to gymnastics, she has a coach that loves Jesus, and I know she loves Jesus, and she pours into my daughter's life in a way that, man, I'm telling you, she respects her more than just about anybody else in her life, and so that's why we invest in that. We're strategic about surrounding our kids with people that love Jesus and love them. So that's great for parents, okay? That's good, practical advice for parents. But there's some people in this room that are not parents, and I want to talk about what this has to do with them. Like, how does this principle of widening the circle apply to people that don't have kids living in their house? What do you think about that?
It's really good. Well, the truth is we have several different age groups in here, and if we start from the youngsters until folks get a little older, here's what we can know. Man, there is purpose for you right now. and we provide that. We allow you guys, we ask for you to come partner up with us, man. I can think of 3 people real quick. I'm going to go really quick. A lady named Kathy Francioli. She was retired in her 60s, and at the end of the day, she just said, hey, I don't know if I can even be used, Kevin, but at the end of the day, like, I want to try. And so she started hopping on, helping out with our youth. One of the best youth leaders I ever had, because you know what? She had a little bit more time to write letters, to send out texts, to take time out for our kids. I had a kid that was in 10th grade. In 10th grade, he said, you know what? I want to be more than just about me. I want to serve our middle school. And so every single week, he served as a small group leader for middle school. And then I think about so many people that are like college age. I think of Chelsea and Mallory, so many people in my past that I go back and I look at like this. They are deciding that life is about truly laying themselves down. And there's something that happens in that whenever you say, hey, you know, I'm going to live for Christ and serve others and be about others. And we provide that. If you would like to serve anything like that, fill that out on your card. We'd love for you to get involved in that. Anyways, no, I don't want to take up too much time, so go ahead.
No, I agree with that 100%. Serve. That's the biggest thing. What Reggie said last week, he said something that he could say because he was a guest speaker. And he came in and he said, if you've been attending here for 2 years and you're not serving, we can't help you anymore. We can't help you grow in Christ because this is a step you have got to take on your own. This is huge. This place only works because people like you show up and serve. And I think that's huge. If you want to get involved in a place where you can pour into other people, you know, maybe it's the next generation or maybe it's somebody else. We're going to put a little slide up here that says text to serve. We make it really easy. Text and you can get plugged in that way. But it doesn't just have to happen at church. You know, I've got a list of names of people in my life that have invested in me as well. One of them, his name was Josh, and he was a college student, and he was my next door neighbor. He loved Jesus, and he saw that I was going through a terrible breakup when I was in 9th grade. You know, so he reached out to me, and he said, let's go watch a movie together. And when he brought me in, he allowed me to just, you know, mature right there with him. He allowed me to have conversations with somebody that was investing in me because they wanted to. He ended up taking me out to lunch on a regular basis and just talking about the Bible. You know, he just saw opportunity and he invested in me that way. Listen, you've got to be looking for opportunities to invest in the next generation. The church is a great place to do it, but there's other places as well. Listen, if you're a middle school student or a high school student or a college student, you have influence on your side. My daughter is 9. I told you that. She's now serving in the 2-year-old room. She gets poured into in one service, and then she goes over and serves and pours into others in the next service. Worship one, serve one. And we love that because she has influence on her side. When those 2-year-olds look at her, they see somebody cool, you know, somebody they want to be just like. When you guys serve in different environments, that's what these other kids and students, that's what they see as somebody that they love and they want to be just like. Single people, you have time on your side. You know, you don't have to explain to anybody why you're not home by 9 o'clock. You know, you get to go hang out with students and hang out with kids and invest in them. Adults, you have wisdom. And even though you may be given the exact same advice that their parents are giving, it's different when it comes from you who's not their parent. And so you've got to look for a place, look for an opportunity that you can use what God has given you and invest in the lives of other people. Come alongside parents and lighten the load and help them out. So then the final question is this: how can we model this? How can we, as adults or as young people, how can we model this to the next generation? And the first thing we've got to do is we've just got to accept the fact that this is a concept that applies as much to us as it does to our young people. You know, as I look through the Bible, I see that Moses had Jethro, who taught him leadership and delegation. Joshua had Moses, who taught him how to lead well. Ruth had Naomi, who taught her how to find a godly husband and deal with some tough family dynamics. Elisha had Elijah, who taught him how to hear the voice of God. Mary had Elizabeth, who walked with her and gave her confidence during one of the most difficult times of her life. The disciples, they had Jesus, who taught them everything. Paul had Barnabas who helped him network. Timothy had Paul, and he rose him up to be a godly man who made a difference in this world. Listen, those are some of the heroes in Scripture, and they all recognized they needed other people in their life, other people who were going to invest in them, surround them, make a difference in their life, and then they modeled that for the next generation so that they could learn from that and embrace that as well. Kevin, you want to explain this and illustrate it to us?
Yeah, I look at this as man, I have a hard time with some of these things. I remember this. I didn't grow up in church. As a matter of fact, I was far from a believer when I was in middle school and high school, and I lived that way. One of the prayers that I pray over my kids often is that my kids fall in love with Jesus and that they fall in love with the church. It's one of my greatest fears that they'll end up hating the church for whatever reason. And there's a lot of bad blood in this day and age where it says that almost 47% of Americans are lonely. In a day and age, and we want to talk about our kids, in a day and age where they say Gen Z is the loneliest generation that we have seen. I come back and I think this way. One of the reasons why I pray that prayer is really simple. Man, I want to make sure that I have people. It's so much different than if it's just me and Georgette or me and Adam fighting this battle together for our kids. But when I can get others to surround my kids and circle around me and my family, that's a game changer, folks. Listen, when I was that age, I remember feeling lonely. I remember feeling broken. And the reason why I want my kids to fall in love with Jesus, because he can heal all of their wounds. Because he's going to bring salvation to them. Because even in my weak moments, he all of a sudden can take something that I did and turn it into something good. The reason why I want my kids to fall in love with the church and be surrounded by others is very simple. Because when they feel like they are beaten or broken, somebody will go and surround them and say, come with me, walk with me. So that they have a pastor or a youth pastor that's going to surround them and speak truth into their life. And then also that when they're struggling, when there's nobody else they feel like that they have around them, somebody's going to get in the hole, like Reggie said last week, and pray for them. Let's stand up. Let's get ready to worship together.